Ladies and gentlemen, we are up to chapter 32, the world famous chapter 32 in Tanya. 32 numerically, or in Hebrew, the numerology associated with the number 32 is Lamed and Bet, Lamed being that 30, of 30, and Bet that of 2, numerically 32. What does the word Lev mean in Hebrew?
Heart.
Or in Boston we say hot, okay? It's your hot. So this is a bit of a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer the question, but nonetheless, you may know of somebody or some-bodies, if you will, who get on your nerves. Just think of that person that whenever you see them, they just rub you the wrong way. No matter what they say, they get you going. Sometimes you see them, it's like the hair on your neck stands up. No matter what they say, it's always going to be the wrong thing. It's going to bother you. It's going to get under your skin. It could be somebody's spouse, hopefully not, but on a serious note. But it can be anybody. The question is, how do I deal with this? When I find that person, I really don't like them. For whatever reason it may be, justified, unjustified, personal, impersonal. What do I do with it? Just live with it? Is it just going to be a factor of life? Or there's a means of properly handling things, or maybe are there any tools which I can use to sort of get over that feeling of that person that I just dislike, that I have to work with? It could be a coworker, a boss, an employee, it could be anybody. So the Alter Rebbe starts out this chapter discussing how do we, in a sense, deal with. Hang on a second, we're just passing the, I don't even know what that is. Ginger. All right, there you go. We got Ginger, we have Gilligan. Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, so we're up to chapter 32, found on page 361. Love your fellow as yourself. Sounds easy. At times it can be a little difficult. There you go. Relationships and the ego. So the tools and meditations of the prior chapters 29 through 31 will help you to loosen the ties of your ego and find joy in the spiritual through adopting the outlook of your divine soul. In this chapter, we'll discuss how this ego-less attitude will affect the way you look at other people. So just in short, if you no longer have an ego, just enjoy the sushi, then you don't need this class. If you still have an ego, then buckle your seatbelts. Please put away your belongings in the overhead compartment and enjoy the ride. Exactly. Now, when you put into practice the above ideas, those are the prior chapters. In last week's chapter, we discussed this notion so that your body becomes, quote, disgusting in your eyes and repulsive. You find happiness in the joy of your divine soul alone. This frame of mind will be an easily accessible, straightforward path. To love your fellow as yourself, extending love to every soul in Israel from great to small. Just for those who were not here last week. So what does this mean? To view my body as this repulsive, disgusting thing. Is that a nice way to look at your body in the morning? Well, if you have the right mirror, then everything looks fantastic. But most mirrors don't lie, right? Well, why would I want to look at my body as repulsive and disgusting? I mean, it doesn't seem like a very flattering thing to do. It's not really going to put me in a good mood. In case I have trouble with being in a bad mood and figuring out how to get into a bad mood, that's a good way to do it, if you're lacking anything else. Have a seat, Joe. Okay. Make yourself at home. Yes. So the answer is because the example that we cited, how do I let anyone else into the class from long distance? Can someone hit that admit button?
But we can't press it, you have to do it on the.
I don't have anything to do it on.
Is it touch screen? No.
It is a touch screen. You want to just try it and see if that works? Because this.
Nope.
I know.
Sushi.
Sushi. Hello? or the other side.
Somebody else must have that one.
There's got to be a better way to do this next time. I have to do it on his screen because
I
that's
think
streaming.
somebody's done it.
That's streaming off whatever. Anyway, it's on. So last week, what is this notion of viewing the body as something which is despicable, disgusting, and the like? When you think about it in these terms, in which the soul, a divine soul, is basically entrapped like a captive, if you will, in the physical body. The divine soul wants nothing but divinity, wants to be holy, wants to be attracted to God and not be encumbered by this physical body. The physical body acts in a sense like a prison to that divine soul. And all of the temptations which go along with the physical body, which are antithetical to the divine soul, make the body like this disgusting thing to the divine soul that wants nothing but absolute purity and cleanliness. And the physical body at times can be just the very opposite. So when a person is in a sense able to put into the practices we mentioned of last week, of viewing our bodies, if you will, as being repulsive, disgusting in our own eyes, and you find happiness in the joy of your divine soul, so then that helps to bring you to be able to fulfill the words of our sages in which you should love your fellow man as yourself. What is the connection from one to the next? So he says, Kimi Achat, we're at the bottom of page 361. Kimi Achat shegufa nimas mesuav etzlai. When your body, which separates you from others, becomes repulsive and disgraceful to you, you'll appreciate more the value of the divine soul, which unites us all. Because in reality, what separates us? What creates division amongst people, and at times derision that goes along with that? Ego, very good. So ego, but ego would be, and ego is associated with what, your divine soul or your animal / vital soul? Exactly. So it's the animal soul, the side of impurity, the side of unholiness is what ultimately creates division amongst people. The better than thou, which translates into ego and the like, that, you know, we may look down upon certain people because of what they do or what they don't do. You may like them, dislike them, whatever the story may be. When the ego's gone, right? Ultimately, when the ego's gone, then to a large degree, we're all the same. We kind of all came out, we're all cut from the same cloth at the top, from Hashem himself. And for this, as for the soul and spirit, who knows their greatness and worth in their root and source of the living God. So, yeah, when you come down to this physical world, after many, many transitions of godliness and transmutations and symptom and contraction and concealment, yes, so then there's this person and that person. This one is a nicer person, not as nice a person, better looking, less better looking, smarter, not as smart. All the different divisions only really take place in the physical world that we live in down here. Okay, which granted is the world that we relate to. But still in all, if you in a sense removed all of that, distractions, if you will, what are you left with? A pure soul. And on that level, all the pure souls are all pure souls. They all come exactly from the same place. And on that level, there's no machlekes, there's no headbutting. There's nothing to distract you. There's nothing to be jealous of. There's no ego. Page 362. So even if you disregard the concerns of the body, there might be an obstacle in coming to love your fellow as yourself from the soul's perspective. For example, if someone is inferior to you spiritually, you may find it difficult to love them as yourself. So you're going to say, okay, let's assume for argument's sake that I can go over the fact that some other guy or woman or whatever it is much wealthier than I, and I should really have their money, and I don't, and I'm jealous. Okay, let me see. Let's say I can get by that. Fine, I'm happy. They do well. I don't do as well, but c'est la vie. But what happens though on the spiritual level? Let's assume for argument's sake that I view myself as Mr. Super Jew, right? And I wear my S cape for Super Jew on the back, you know what I mean? And I flout my super Jewishness, and anybody who's not on my super Jewish level, I look down upon as like, you know, you shouldn't use the term, a bad Jew. I hear this from other people. They tell me I'm a bad Jew. I said, I never met a bad Jew. Bad Jew doesn't exist. In my book, there's no bad Jew. Maybe some Jews are more observant, less observant. Not a bad Jew. These are the terms that they used to tell me about themselves. But let's assume, for argument's sake, someone's on their high horse, and they think in their minds that they're super Jew, you know, king in the mountain, and then there's the bad Jews, if you will, the ones in their minds that are not doing what they're supposed to do. Is that a justified perspective? Because, well, on one hand, they're supposed to be observing Torah mitzvahs. Let's say they're not, okay? And in this man's distorted mind, they're the bane of the reason for all the ills of the world. Whatever comes into the guy's head, is that justified? So the Alter Rebbe says, therefore, Tanya states here, even if someone appears to be lower than you spiritually speaking, as for the soul and spirit, who knows their greatness and worth? We don't really know. You ought to humble yourself before this person, for perhaps his or her soul is greater than yours. So, earlier in Tanya, much earlier in Tanya, in fact, I think it's towards the end of chapter 1, we spoke about the fact how it's possible that a person can have an extremely high soul, coming from a high place, even if their parents, if you will, were not the most upright and the greatest people in the world, and sinned and whatnot, and maybe you would think, well, they shouldn't be deserving of bearing such a great child. Nonetheless, that child's soul can come from an extremely high place, even if they're not, quote unquote, serving Hashem as one should, or as we think they should. It doesn't mean that their soul is not coming from a very high plateau. It got thrown down into the world of Klippa and the like. That might be true. Can I ask you a question?
About the cookies?
A little later. Just the recipe. How do you get those chips in there?
Go ahead.
When somebody else comes on the screen, instead of me going to your office and having to hit admit, there's no way to do it
I
from
can
here.
turn it off for now, yeah.
No, I'm saying, but if someone else comes on in the middle of the class, how do you admit them?
We'll figure that out.
That's why I said it was a good question, you see. Okay. So the Alter Rebbe continues, ultimately, at the level of essence, all souls are equal, being that all of them are alike, and they all have one Father. So at the very top of things, at the inception of the creation of souls, we all come from exactly the same spot. It's not like, oh, your soul comes from a better place, a higher place. It's not true. Every one of our souls, at the very inception of it, at the very top of the ladder, if you will, comes all from one place. It's true. As time goes on, I guess, as Tzimtzum goes on, as the contraction of godliness goes on, so then yes, there's more and more concealments, perhaps until that soul is manifest in some way, shape, or form at a practical level, whether it comes in the world of Atzilut or Bria, the various different spiritual worlds. But if you keep going up beyond that, we're all exactly from the same neighborhood. So that's why all Israel are called brothers, literally, due to their single source of their souls in the one God. It's only their bodies that separate them. So therefore, for those who make their bodies primary and their soul secondary, it's impossible for them to have genuine love and brotherhood among them, but only conditional love. In other words, that your love for that other person, if it's conditioned upon something, the moment that something is gone, the love is gone. So like in any healthy marriage, a healthy marriage is not meant to be a conditional marriage. Like a tit for tat. I'm there for you, you're there for me. Because the moment, whatever that is, quote unquote, that I married that person for, let's argue for argument's sake. Let's say someone married someone for money. Bad example, but nonetheless, it happens once in a while, particularly in other cultures, right? So you marry, so as long as the money's there, then the other spouse is very happy. Get to buy, spend, whatever it may be. The moment the money's gone, we got a problem. Because the whole love is based on the money or the thing or whatever it may be. That's a conditional love, not the love that a marriage is meant to have. That's like the ultimate union that we can think of in our physical world. So the same thing applies here. The moment when a person's love for somebody else is not contingent on anything physical, not the body whatsoever, just the fact that they're another beautiful, godly soul, so then there's nothing in a sense that's going to break that love because it's not contingent on anything down here. There's always going to be that connection. And that's in reality the means or the way that we're supposed to approach other people. Non-judgmental, if you will. Section 2, loving your fellow, is the whole truth. So the famed Hillel, you may have heard of, this will help us explain Hillel the elder's comment about observing this mitzvah of loving your fellow as yourself. So the Gemara says The Talmud says it's the whole Torah, all of it, the rest is commentary. So Yisrael writes, Hillel's statement was not an exaggeration. The mitzvah of loving your fellow has a spiritual dynamic which mirrors the spiritual cause and effect system of the Torah. In other words, it's not just about you and me or you and the other person. That if you love the other person, you're fulfilling this dictum of loving. That might be more of a microcosmic effect between you and someone else. But in reality, it actually has a macrocosmic effect where the entire world is affected by your relationship with that other person. How? So as we have seen, the cause which brings you to love your fellow is just disregarding the mentality of the animal soul / body and shifting to the higher consciousness of the divine soul. The effect is that you bond and connect with your fellow. These two phases of initially transcending the physical and then returning to connecting with it. You're transcending the physical body, but then you're returning back to reconnect with that physical person in the physical body amid a higher consciousness, represent the fundamental basis of the Torah spiritual dynamic. What is that dynamic? L'chaim. For this, you're welcome to have some other l'chaim. I'm just, I'm dosing up on a cup of Joe. No pun intended, Joe.
Okay.
Okay.
A glass if you
Does it
want.
need a cup?
Okay, yeah.
Ki yisoid v'sherish kol Torah kula.
What would you like?
Kol Torah.
I'm living
Yeah, sure.
in Kentucky, Berkeley.
For the whole Torah's whole basis and root principle is twofold. What is the twofold principle?
That's enough.
We'll make a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Elohim shehakol niyah b'dvarim. So the Torah's whole basis and root principle is twofold. The Kabbalists describe this cycle as what's called ratzo followed by shov, or in Hebrew ratzo v'shov, which means literally running, like running towards something or towards transcendence, and subsequently returning to the sensory worldly reality. So, which may seem to be a bit counterintuitive. It's like, on one hand, I'm running away from the physical towards transcendence. I want to get away from all the distractions of the world. But at the same time, what am I doing afterwards? I'm returning back to that sensory experience down here. That's Ratzav V'Shoiv. Ratzav means my great yearning to connect to God. Shoiv means returning back to the physical world, but bringing that transcendent experience back with me down here. The Torah's first root principle is to raise and elevate the soul's importance over the body. Lifting the soul higher and higher to the root and source of all worlds, which is that of Ratzo, the yearning, or what do you call it, running. And also, as we explained below, the second root principle of the Torah is to draw down God's infinite light into the spiritual space, referred to by the Zohar as Knesset Yisrael, which really means like the Jewish people, which is the source of the souls of all Israel. The second phase, that's the Ratzo, that's the yearning, the running up. The show of the returning is a mirror image of the first, a reconnecting of the transcendent reality reached by Ratzo and drawing it back down into a more worldly entity, in this case our souls. So that when we'll merge with one, the one God will merge with our souls, and this happens specifically when they are united down below in this world. We're on page 364. But not when there is division among the souls, God forbid. For the Blessed Holy One won't dwell in a blemished place. As we say in the davening every day, multiple times, bless all of us, our Father, as one with the light of your face, as has been explained at length elsewhere. So in order for the second phase, the shov, the return, to be effective, for God's infinite light to gush into Knesset Yisrael, the source of our souls, we need to be united down here in the physical world. If we're not united down here, Knesset Yisrael will be fragmented and won't receive God's infinite light, since the Blessed Holy One won't dwell in a blemished place. From this brief insight, we see that the mitzvah of loving your fellow has a spiritual dynamic, which is central to the whole Torah. With this in mind, when you observe this mitzvah, it will bring even more joy of your soul, knowing that you are doing something essential to the Torah's vision. I'm going to use a completely inappropriate example to illustrate this point. If that's okay, perhaps. There are certain experiences that people look for in life, which don't necessarily, well, the overall experience probably does not fit in line necessarily with the Torah lifestyle, but nonetheless. So let's use the example of Burning Man.
The festival.
The Yontiv, yeah, exactly. The whole Yontiv of Burning Man, which instead I've never been to, so far I can say. From what my understanding of Burning Man is they go out to the desert, I think it's Nevada someplace or somewhere in thereabouts, in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Point of the matter is that you're sort of leaving everything behind. You're living out in the desert. It's dirty, it's dusty, what have you. But basically everybody's shit. No one's, there's no one dressing to impress. I mean, they have all kinds of wacko outfits that people wear, whatever it may be. The crazier the better. But nonetheless, it's not about me coming to puts all made up, what have you, in dressed to the nines. People are sharing with each other. This one has food, this one has water. The judgmentalism, in a sense, I think the philosophy behind part of it is it goes out the window. Maybe somewhat akin to what Woodstock was back in the 60s, but they say if you were there, you don't remember it anyway, so I don't know. And I wasn't there. But it's what it is. So, what?
Or you don't remember it.
Or you don't remember it. Or they said about the 70s too, so I don't know.
Yeah. My son's been there several times.
The Woodstock?
Burning Man.
The Burning Man.
Yeah.
So ironically, there's a lot of Jews. I've heard there's a minion there also. I don't know.
No kidding.
Yeah, for better or for worse. Everything is on the up and up in terms of modesty in these places. But part of the philosophy is that you're shedding materialism, shedding the physicality. Granted, it's all with music and trance and whatever they get into, sort of to get out of the physical world that you're in, all the stresses of daily living. You just leave it behind. Doesn't matter what you look like. You're dirty, whatever it is, but you're fed and you give, you get drink and water and food and probably some other stuff, which maybe that part's not the healthy part. And lots of music, and it's just like you left it all behind. So, and sort of, I'd assume, I would imagine, the feeling is it creates this communion with other people, strangers who you had nothing to do with, many of whom you never met. And all of a sudden, like stuff which would have bothered you perhaps in the commercial world about these other, it doesn't matter now. It's like, it means nothing. Lahavdil el favdalah, to separate the completely profane / mundane from the holy, okay? So the experience that the Alter Rebbe is conveying over here is that when a person leaves behind, quote unquote, the disgusting repulsive body, that which creates separation between one person and the next, whether it is abject materialism, the rat race, if you will, of Wall Street or wherever you may be working, or other places, or it's just some people, they just grind on you for whatever reason it may be. It could be our own ego issues, it can be our own inhibitions, our own whatever, it could be a whole slew of reasons why they bother you. Sometimes it's our own lack of self-confidence. It's because you're not feeling confident in who you are, in what you are, so therefore even the slightest thing that someone else does, it bothers you to no end. Whereas under normal circumstances, you just shrug it off, it's like big deal. I mean, who cares? So when we're able to separate all that, take the ego out, in a sense, we do the rutzo. We're running, in a sense, to that transcendent experience, leaving all the junk behind. So then we have the show. We bring it back, in a sense, in a much more sensory way, back down to our physical world, because we're still living here as physical people. But now we've, in a sense, left all the junk, okay, that's a nice word to put it, behind. That's really the show, returning with this feeling of abject love, if you will, to whomever it may be. And I've left all the reasons not to love that person elsewhere. Okay, so does this apply to everybody? You're going to say, okay, I got it, but there's always that one person, you know what I'm saying? Or maybe two of them that I can't. I mean, I'm sure it applies to everyone else, asterisk, except for. And then fill in the blank. Does it or not? One more time, L'chaim. For the video, this is coffee, just so we're clear. All right. Not that anybody would suspect otherwise on Thursday. Okay. So while the Torah warns in general against harboring hatred for another, as it states specifically in Leviticus, do not hate your brother in your heart. The rabbis taught that it is obligatory to show contempt towards a sinful person. So now I got a question. On one hand, I'm commanded, love your fellow man as yourself. Now I have another commandment that says, what does it say? Do not hate your brother in your heart. Then it says it's obligatory to show contempt towards a sinful person. How do I have contempt to a sinful person and love them at the same time? Can you have both emotions working simultaneously? Basically, love and hate happening to the same person at the same time.
Oh, contempt towards a sinful person.
Well, okay, but usually that's the person that you wouldn't love necessarily. And as for the Talmud's teaching that if you witness your friend sinning, it's a mitzvah to show contempt for him. That's what it's an actual mitzvah brought down in what the Gemara explains it. And you should also inform his teachers so that he can show contempt for him as well. So not only does the Torah say that you have to show contempt to him, but you should get his teacher to also show contempt to that person. It's like, let's get a whole bunch of people together. Let's start showing a lot of contempt. We're going to have a contempt rally.
Sounds like Lashon Hara.
Well, almost. In this case, it only says his teacher. Doesn't mean you have to put it on the airwaves, but nonetheless. So the Sefer Charedim, which is the codification of the mitzvahs by Rabbi Elazar Askari, 16th century, adds an important stipulation to the Talmud's position. Quote, if you see a person commit a sin, and you rebuke him respectfully, but he does not cease, doesn't stop, then it's a mitzvah to show him contempt. So it's not just straight up, you see a person sinning, right away contempt. You see them sinning, you try respectfully to wagging their finger and tell them how many years they're going to burn in hell for having sinned. That's not what it's talking about. Not the fire and brimstone approach of old, anyway. Okay? You did it like a mensch. And still in all, they reject that. They don't listen to you. So then, he says it's a mitzvah to show him contempt. Now, this means that showing contempt to the sinner is a requirement only where, A, the sinner has been rebuked, and B, he fails to listen and continues to sin. This, in turn, imposes a further significant limitation. Why? Since the requirement to rebuke a sinner is only applicable in a particular scenario. So, like, all the chips have to be in place in order to fulfill this admonition. The Torah states, page 1365, you must repeatedly rebuke your associate, which is in the Hebrew is called amisecha or amitecha from Leviticus, and your associate is interpreted to mean one who is like you. Now what happens if the person is not like you? Are you still supposed to show contempt to them? It's only if they're like you. So if he is like you, in what? In obedience to mitzvahs, you are to rebuke him when he sins. But if he is not, you are not called upon to rebuke him. Meaning that if you have somebody, for example, that's not on your level, on par with your level of observance, and you see them doing something wrong, so then this admonition does not apply. Because let's say you're the super Jew, or whatever you consider yourself to be, God's gift to mankind, best thing since Wonder Bread. The other cliches?
Present company accepted.
Right, naturally. Okay, but let's assume somebody does not, they're not brought up with the same ideals, the Torah ideals and what have you. So then all of a sudden now, they're not like you, meaning that they're not living that same level of Torah observance. So now all of a sudden I don't have that same mitzvah to rebuke them because they're not like me. Okay, and it doesn't mean it like me, like, in terms of what I think of myself, in truth, where I am spiritually. So as the Tanya will now clarify, the Talmud's view that it is a requirement or a mitzvah to show contempt to a sinner only applies when three conditions are present. Number one, the sinner is a Torah observant person. In other words, that they know the better. Two, you have rebuked him respectfully. And three, he doesn't listen to you. So this is really only applicable in truth when somebody knows the better. If someone doesn't know the better, they don't know the difference necessarily, so then you're not supposed to rebuke them. You don't have a mitzvah to rebuke them. I mean, you should teach them, what have you, but not to rebuke them. Because the Talmud's ruling applies to not to any person, but specifically to your associate, which means you're equal in full Torah and mitzvah observance. And it also only applies to an associate towards whom you have already fulfilled the mitzvah, you must repeatedly rebuke your fellow. And this mitzvah of rebuking your fellow applies exclusively to someone who is like you in Torah mitzvahs, as we mentioned above. And even after you've rebuked them, nevertheless, despite your attempts to respectfully correct his behavior, the person has not ceased practicing this sin. As stated before in Sefer Charedim. So these criteria are required to establish the intentionality of the sin. If the person is not like you in Torah mitzvot, not educated and observant, then even his deliberate sins are considered as inadvertent acts. They're accidental. Even if he is, quote, like you cannot be sure that his act was intentional until you've clearly rebuked him and he fails to listen. Only at that point is there a rabbinic obligation to show him contempt. In other words, if the person to whom you're speaking or rebuking, in essence, doesn't really understand the significance of their sin, they don't realize, the egregiousness of it, then you're not meant to be rebuking them because they're not educated. No, thank you. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know why they're doing or what they're doing. Are we with me? So
A little bigger. What does that mean to show contempt? That's kind of a vague.
you use like a baseball bat or something. You know what I mean? That's your kind of.
Exactly my point.
That's how we did it back in Brooklyn. You know what I'm saying? It means to verbally rebuke them. You're supposed to tell them, this is wrong. You shouldn't be doing this. Whatever it may be, something along those lines. But again, you can't just walk over to a stranger. You see someone in the streets doing something like that. You really shouldn't be doing that. That always goes over very well. It's a great way to make friends, and they can show you whatever knives they're holding, things like that. So the old saying goes in comedy: it's all in the delivery, right?
Yes, yeah.
It's not so much even the message at times; it's how the message is delivered. So, in essence, the same thing applies here, even if the person is on par with you. Okay. What does that say? I admit. I'll be right back because the only admittance I can do is to be in the other room.
Abner, somebody. Abner Levika?
Elise, does your computer have a camera?
They can't,
They can't hear you.
unless they're admitted.
No, they're not.
They're not admitted.
It's,
Oh, no,
they are
that is
now.
the new
No,
Abner.
this is streaming.
There
off.
you go. See, you can
Yeah.
invite people to turn their cameras on. Elise, you have a camera?
That's fine. They don't have to keep it on. That's fine.
Why?
That's fine.
You really want
The-
to see me? You don't have to see me.
Okay.
Nothing to see.
Sefer Charedim was written like 500 years ago, 16th century.
What's the Haredi come for a word? The word what does it mean? Haredi.
It's not talking necessarily Haredi in terms of what's used today as like the ultra orthodox is the term that's used. Okay, this is a different thing. All right. So any questions till now? No questions? Fantastic.
Isn't that better?
The contempt, again, is just to maybe shun the person, kind of give them the cold shoulder in that sense?
No, that's not no, but we're going to see in a minute actually.
Okay.
How's that? So it's a good question. How do I convey my contempt?
Does this apply to Jews only, or inter-Jewish?
Well,
Intra-Jewish, people?
No, so it's actually specifically to Jewish people. Why? Because the mitzvah to
because-
love your fellow man as yourself, literally,
Yeah.
is to a fellow Jew. Because yourself, if you're Jewish, the only other person that could be like yourself is someone who has an neshama that's Jewish like yourself. That's the literal interpretation of that. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be nice to non-Jews. I mean, we also have to be very kind and what have you, compassionate and the like. But the mitzvah per se, so by extension, the same mitzvah to go and rebuke your fellow man is also only to another Jew. It works both ways. Okay, because non-Jews are not commanded to fulfill the 613 commandments. They have the 7 no-hide laws. So in those, you're supposed to encourage them, what have you. But you don't have the same mitzvah to love them as yourself does not exist, and therefore the mitzvah to rebuke them is also not the same. It's not applicable to them. It's only applicable to the person to whom is like yourself. And as a Jewish person, that would be to another Jew who has a neshama.
Makes sense.
So if you call them on something their religion says they're supposed to do and they don't do it, you know about it.
I mean, you're talking about another religion?
Yeah.
Yes, and if you want to,
If you know enough about the other religion.
if what they're doing contradicts one of the 7 Noahide laws, then yes. Which are basically do not steal, do not kill, to commit murder, adultery, idolatry, not to blaspheme God's name, not to literally, it says, not to tear off a limb from a live animal, or basically causing unnecessary harm to animals, and then also to set up like a judicial system in their country. Any of those 7, then yes, you should certainly encourage, rebuke, whatever you might be, those people who are transgressing that.
Right.
Okay, willfully, is that they know that it's wrong. Just because they exist, the laws exist, doesn't mean that they know the laws exist either. Akin to a Jew who also doesn't know about many of the mitzvot, and if they don't know about the mitzvot, your job is not to sit and rebuke them.
That's why you said at the same level. That's why. it
Correct,
says that.
right, so they
Where
have to be
you
on
are.
par with you.
Okay.
So yes, if it was a religious, I don't know, let's say it was a religious Christian, for argument's sake,
Yeah.
you know, so, and they're the ones who are going and committing adultery, and they know they shouldn't be committing adultery, you know, so then it has to be done in a appropriate way. And just sitting and wagging their finger and telling them that, you know, about all the ills of hell and the devils and the whatever else they believe in, I don't know, whatever it may be, is probably not going to make you a friend, and it may not change their ways. Okay?
Right.
But I don't know if there's a mitzvah per se to tell them that. There is a responsibility that we have to educate them of the 7 Noahide laws. That a Jew does have an obligation to do.
I've never heard that before.
I made it up. Isn't it good?
7 what?
7 Noahide laws. There were 7 laws given to Noah and his children.
Noah, okay,
Noah, pre-Sinai.
right, okay. So this is, sounds something we have the 10 Commandments, that's what you always hear.
Part of those are part and parcel of the 10 Commandments, but they were given to the world prior. Noah lived 10 generations from Adam.
Okay.
So, and then Abraham was
Okay,
10
so
generations
then-
later. What?
Right, okay, no, now I'm connecting that.
Okay.
I thought it was a different word, that's what.
No, Noah, as in
Noah.
Noah, hide,
7
whatever.
Noah laws,
Yeah.
okay.
Or Noahide is the Hebrew.
Yeah.
But I have trouble with the ch sounds, so I say Noahide. Hi, how are you? Okay. All right, we're at the bottom of page 365. Avomi she'enei chaverev. Now, in the case of a person who's not your associate, meaning that they're not on par with you, they lack the real knowledge and education necessary for an intentional sin, and he's not close to you, and therefore unlikely to accept your rebuke, there's no room at all for contempt, only love. So, if the person to whom you're speaking either is not on your level spiritually, or you're just not friends, you know what I mean? You're not, what's what we used to say, jiving with each other, but now they have some other word that, I forgot the modern, there's new languages that the children use.
Hanging.
Yeah, no, but there's a, you're not jive, I just heard it recently, I forgot what it is, whatever. Some other word that they use, which means that you don't jive with each other, bottom line is. So then you're not supposed to show them contempt, because in reality, they're not going to listen to you. They're just going to get angry at you. So in that case, that person should only be shown love. Period. In such an instance, or such a case, page 366, Hillel the elder taught, be of the disciples of Aaron, love peace, and pursue peace, love all creatures and bring them close to the Torah. Period. So Aaron was considered to be the epitome of peacemaking.
Without the balance of Gevurah.
So the balance of, again, the balance, okay, so the balance of Gevurah, I should explain for everybody else who's not familiar with the terminology. There's something called chesed, which is kindness. Gevurah literally translates as strength / judgment or discipline. Typically speaking, one is supposed to have a balance of the two of them. So if you have only chesed, only kindness with no discipline, it's also not healthy. or if you only have discipline and no kindness, love is also not healthy. There should be a healthy coalescence of the two, which in Hebrew or in the form of the Sfirot is known as Tiferet, beauty. So you ever seen these Kabbalistic charts? They're kind of triangular in nature. You have Chesed, let's assume this is your right, or it's my right, whatever. Chesed on the right, Kavura, strength on the left, Tiferet, beauty in the middle, Netzach, everlastingness on the right. It's sort of like, it goes like this, like that, triangular. With the Malchus, there's 7 different Sefirot, if you will, 7 different levels. So yes, there's supposed to be a coalescence of the two of them, but in reality, showing them true love. In other words, if you want to get through to somebody, it doesn't mean love where it's unhealthy love. What it means is that if you want to get through to somebody and in a sense develop some sort of a relationship, let's say with a stranger, somebody with whom you don't have much to do, are you going to get further by displaying sort of like boundless love or by coming across like, as a drill sergeant? Well, the answer is no. As a drill sergeant, most people are not best friends with their drill sergeant, at least not intentionally. Okay. On the other hand, if you show true compassion to somebody who's in need, you're going to open up a pipeline. It's like, well, this person really cares about me. And now all of a sudden, because they feel, and you do care about them, so now they're more apt to listen to you, even if you're rebuking them about something that they shouldn't be doing. They're going to respect you and look at you because they recognize you as being somebody who really cares, not just giving them a hard time for the sake of giving them a hard time. That's contextual to what he says. Meaning that even those who are distant from God's Torah and his worship, which is why they're referred to here as mere creatures. That's so it says regarding that of Aaron, this is from Ethics of Our Fathers. Be the disciples of Aaron, love peace, pursue peace, love all creatures, and bring them close to Torah. He's not talking about loving the ants and the spiders, and we can love that too. Okay? But creatures, meaning that that the only, in a sense, nice thing I can say about them is that they're creatures. They're God's creatures. They're not necessarily great people and doing what they should be. But even those people, it says, Aaron said of what did Aaron say? He said regarding these people, love peace, pursue peace, and bring them closer to Torah.
Creature must mean coming from creation.
It does. That's where the word, yes, correct. Etymologically, that is where it comes from. V'chula hai, v'ula yuchel karven l'keteva averes Hashem. Sorry, I skipped a little bit here. The Alma was referred to as creatures having no merits of their own beyond the fact they were created by God. Nevertheless, you must draw them in with thick cords of love. And then, perhaps, with all this effort, you'll be able to bring them closer to the Torah and worship of God. So above, the Tanya stresses that love for another ought to be unconditional, due to all souls' equal root and source in the living God. Yet here, the text stresses that there is a goal in extending love to the non-observant. Perhaps, with all this, you will be able to bring him closer to the Torah and worship of God. Is there a goal to loving your fellow, or is the love to be extended unconditionally? Which one is it? So the answer is that both are true. Jewish identity is multi-layered, so the mitzvah to love your fellow is likewise multi-layered. At the level of essence, a Jew is connected with God regardless of his or her level of observance. However, the manifest reality in the world as God created it is that a connection to God comes through Torah mitzvahs. So above, when the Tanya taught that love should be extended unconditionally due to every soul's equal root and source in the living God, we were speaking of love towards a Jew's essence. But here, in stressing that, quote, perhaps, with all this effort, you will be able to bring them closer to the Torah and worship of God, the Torah speaks of the manifest reality where a Jew's connection to God must be through Torah. Practically speaking, we need to incorporate both attitudes, to love each Jew's essence by virtue of their soul, but this must also lead to their manifest connection with God through Torah observance. And if not, if you didn't succeed in bringing the person closer to Torah and worship of God, you still didn't lose the reward for observing the mitzvah of loving your fellow, which is carried out unconditionally. In other words, if you tried your best in reality, and the person, for whatever reason may be, is obstinate, and they don't want to listen, you've done your due. It's not like, oh, I'm a failure, it didn't work. not everything we do always works exactly the way we plan it to, with present company excluded as usual, but nonetheless, other than that, it does happen. So kind of to recap the parak, it's a shorter chapter relative to last week's, definitely a shorter chapter. Oh, no, we didn't finish yet, so I'm to section 4. Moving on to section 4. Where was that, Scotch?
It's right in front of you.
Right
Sorry,
there.
I am way overtired. You will work with me here. Okay, but it's still Thursday, right? V'gam ha'mekeravim elav. So, and in the above case of sinning,
Not in New York.
I don't know where I am right now. And in the above case of sinning individuals who are close to you and on par with you in observance, who you have rebuked, but they have not stopped sinning. Towards whom we have learned it's a mitzvah to show contempt to them. It doesn't mean you should show you should just show contempt to them, since there's also a mitzvah to love them too. So even that person who's the sinner, if you will, who's on par with you or whatever it may be, and it's appropriate to rebuke them, that same person you have a mitzvah to rebuke and love them simultaneously. So it's not just straight up rebuke, you're a sinner, or whatever words you want to use. So Tanya addresses how can you have two contradictory engagements with the same person? But both emotions are valid. Why? Contempt because of the evil in them, and love because of the component of God, good which is hidden in them, which is the spark of God within them that energizes the divine soul. So in addition to love and contempt, the Tanya now introduces a third emotion. Okay, so you have love, you have contempt, if you will, and now the next one is compassion, rachmanis. Through compassion, the two contradictory emotions of love and contempt can be reconciled. Also, you ought to arouse compassion in your heart for that person's divine soul, because you feel badly, you feel it really bothers you, empathetic, because it is a divine soul exiled amid the evil of the Sitra Achra, which in the case of Rishayim overpowers the divine soul. And compassion has the effect of neutralizing contempt and awakening love. As it's known from the verse to Yaakov who redeemed Abraham. Yaakov is symbolic of compassion, Avram of love. I gave you the example before about that triangular, Kabbalistic shape, the Sphirot. So it says that all our forefather Avram epitomized that of Chesed. Let's say my right, okay, your left, but let's assume it's the other way around. So the right side is that of Avram. He's abject kindness. The left side is Yitzchak, which is abject strength / discipline and the like. And then Yaakov in the center, Jacob, was known as Rachmanis. He's the epitome of compassion, which is a healthy coalescence of both kindness and discipline put together. So, because compassion doesn't just mean giving, because the person said, give me. It means giving them in a healthy measure. Example that one could use, perhaps, let's say someone who is now a drug addict, okay, and they have an addiction to drugs or any type of addiction to alcohol, whatever it may be. Let's use drugs as an example. So somebody who has a drug addiction, if they don't take their daily dose or whatever it may be, shoot up, so they go through withdrawal symptoms. And if you ever watch someone go through withdrawal symptoms, but it's very painful. It's even painful to watch, okay? Because the person is physically in pain. It's not a pleasant experience for anybody. And I mean, if they go to a facility, they try to give medications to mitigate, there's nausea and there's shaking and it's just until the body in a sense rids itself, the withdrawal, if you will, which takes day, 2, whatever, it's not a matter of an hour or 2. So one way, in a sense, to get rid of those symptoms is to give them drugs again. The moment they take a hit, they're fine. Or fine, I mean, relatively speaking. Those symptoms are gone. So you might say, but if it's someone that you care about, someone that one loves and the like, and you see them suffering, and you know you can cure that suffering just out of compassion, okay, I'll give you another hit, you know what I mean? Maybe you'll get over it some other time. Are you really helping them? So that's misplaced compassion. And the same thing can be with misplaced kindness and misplaced, severity or judgment or discipline and like. So there has to be a healthy balance of all of those. And when you have a healthy balance of both chesed of kindness and a healthy balance of discipline, then you have a healthy balance of compassion. Follow? So that's what Yaakov was representative of. So in compassion, compassion has the effect of neutralizing contempt and awakening love, as it's shown from the verse, to Jacob who redeemed Avram. So Jacob is symbolic of compassion, as I mentioned. Avram of love. In a situation of contempt, love or Avram can be restored and redeemed through compassion. That you can restore the love you have for somebody or something, let's say in this case, somebody that you no longer love because they wronged you, they did something, whatever it is, they angered you, and therefore I don't love them anymore. But when my compassion kicks in, it can restore that love once again. I'm willing to put aside that which bothered me or whatever it may be. So when you feel sorry for someone who has harmed you, it tends to take away any hatred you may have for them. Compassion ensures that, in most cases, contempt will be neutralized and love will triumph. Typically speaking, who are the people who are most likely to hurt somebody else? Or to create hurt in somebody else? Someone that you care about, exactly. A good friend, let's say, for argument's sake, take family out of the picture. Okay, but if it's a really good friend, you're a BFF, as they call them today, best friend forever, right? Went through high school, blood buddies. I don't know if they still do that now. No one will do it, whatever it is. Okay, blood brothers. But none of really good friends, always been there for each other. And then all of a sudden, somehow the relationship went sour. Someone did something to somebody else, and it kills you. It's like it bothers you to no end. Now, if it was another sort of third party that you didn't have much to do with in life, and they did it to you, it'd be bothersome. But you get on with it. You know what I mean? All right, so what? There's always good people and not such good people. But this person really, you don't understand what went wrong. So there was love, there was kindness going on for decades, and all of a sudden something went sour and that went out the window. But now all of a sudden, let's say the person who wronged, person B who wronged A, person B all of a sudden now is in a very difficult situation. A is angry at them because they did something kind of at some point to ruin the friendship, but now they're looking at B who's suffering terribly, what have you, and all of a sudden it's like Mr. or Miss A starts feeling badly. It's like, oh man, I can't, yes, I'm still upset. I mean, I never got over what you did to me, but my compassion is getting to me. I can't see you suffer as such, and I can help you. So if I'm able to help you, I'm willing to, at that point, to put aside whatever it is, all the garbage that happened, and sort of rekindle that friendship, that kindness. That brings out compassion. So when the compassion comes out, the kindness will follow. Come back, that is. Okay, so so are there any people? My English is not so well. Are there anybody? Is there anybody, okay, to whom this does not apply? Is everybody fair game? I mean, are there some people just, they're abject evil, they're irredeemable, if you will, in our book. So when King David, blessed memory, said, with utter hatred do I hate them, this is from Psalms, he was referring only to the extreme case of highly educated heretics and non-believers that pose a threat to traditional Judaism, who have shed any manifest connection to Judaism, because they're still Jewish. He's talking about Jews. Manifest connection to Judaism, and so have no portion in the God of Israel. Kedisha Gemara Reish Perek Zion, the Shabbos, as stated in the Talmud, Tractate Shabbos. So the Tanya stresses that this hatred is something which King David said because it is not something you should be practicing. When expressing righteous indignation for another person's actions, even though you appear to be taking the moral high ground, how do you know that you are not acting out of an impure motive? You may also have erred in judgment about your friend's heresy, which may in fact be nothing more than a benign short-sightedness, not true heresy. If you act with contempt towards another person and you're wrong in your judgment, then you have hurt somebody unjustifiably, But if you behave lovingly towards everyone, you are definitely doing a mitzvah. Then you don't go wrong. So there are very few people in the world that qualify as quote unquote true apikoursim or heretics in this context. There are people that call themselves agnostics or whatever it is. I don't know. We'll call them heretics, whatever word it may be, and it's used more loosely. Because in truth, to be an apikoros or heretic, according to Torah, one has to have already studied basically all of Torah. You know everything it says, and then you go and openly deny it. I've never met a true heretic, okay, or agnostic, Jewish that is. They'll call themselves agnostics, they don't believe what have you, but they don't even know what they're not believing in, so that's not really not believing in something. It's like saying, I hate pizza, but you never tasted pizza. I mean, to be called spade a spade. You can't deny something if you don't know what you're denying. So just having some generic concept, I just don't believe in God, I believe in science, that doesn't mean anything. You can believe in science, no problem. But it doesn't negate believing in God simultaneously. So in essence, few, if any, people today would qualify as being a true heretic. And therefore, we don't to this motif of, or this verse that King David brought down in chapter, was it 139, I think it is, of Psalm 139, of Psalm, that with, utter hatred do I hate them. There is no one on that level really for us to hate. So yes, to rebuke, only again, number one, if that person is on par with you spiritually in terms of your Torah mitzvahs, they're like you, they're like your friend, and it's done with proper compassion, done in a proper means of conveyance, where you're not in a sense just trying to hurt them and wagging the finger at them, but you're trying to truly help them. At the same time, you have the mitzvah to love them as yourself. All right, anybody got homework? Baruch Hashem.